Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we have the meta snapshot for patch 14.10b. We're going to give you a little update because the meta has been developing as people are playing a bunch of tournaments. Some comps are getting optimized, so let's just get right into the list. In the S tier we have Storied Champion Garen staying at the top. Kobuko Lucky Paws also really good. Both the 1-cost hero augments absolutely nuts. If we want to do a simple data check, just go to stats, augments, and then just look at the top right here. Storied Champion, Lucky Paws, both incredibly insane. Then we have Sage Lillia, level 8 Duelist, which is a bit different from the Reroll Duelist, Ashe Warden, Dragonlord Fast 9, Ghostly Zyra, and then in the A tier we have Syndra Dryad, Mythic Lillia, Yorick, Ethereal Blade Shen, Umbral Alune, Kog'Maw, Duelist Kai'Sa, Storyweaver Bard, Shen Senna, Kayn Sin, Lux, Aphelios Janna, Inkshadow Kai'Sa, Ghostly 4-cost, Zoe builds, Alune, Syndra Faded, and Arcanist Warden. And then in the B and C tier, Yone, Dryad Reroll, Storyweaver, Bard, built different, and Kha'Zix. Probably don't want to be playing too many of those, but let's get into how to play every single one of these comps really quickly. Storied Champion Garen, you gotta get the augment, Storied Champion augment on the very first choice of the game. And what you want is at least 3 Garens before you take this. Pretty simple. I guess you could get away with 2 Garens if you have good items for him. So then after you take the augment, you get a free 2-star Garen. You have 5 Garens at least. And then just get a lot of radiant items if you can. Throw in 6 Wardens, do a 1-cost reroll, and that's going to be it there. Next one up we have is Kobuko Lucky Claws. Play it the same exact way as you do Garen, except you do it with Kobuko and you do it with Bruisers instead of Warden, right? Not too hard on these first 2, so I'll spare you the details on these, but if you do want more details, head on over to bunnymuffins.lol/meta. Check out the how to play section, item recommendations, augments over here, and if you want to play around with a team comp, just click each image and they should bring you up to the team where you could kind of adjust as needed. But going back into the next comp, we have Sage Lillia, probably my default comp of this patch. It's just classic 4-cost comp, Morgana plus Lillia. If you have a lot of ability power items, it's going to be great. Tank, it's going to be Nautilus with the utility items. I like Protector's Vow because it gets Nautilus to cast really quickly. Ionic Spark because you're running a magic damage build and that reduces their magic resistance. So pretty simple there, 3 Sage, 3 Mythic, bunch of different synergies. And if you're thinking of augment recommendations, what do you think would be good with this since we have so many synergies? If you're using your brain, you'll be like, oh, Stand United, probably pretty good. But realistically speaking, any augment works with this comp. Anything that gives a bunch of items is good. Any combat augment, any econ to get to level 8. Like, honestly, that's what's so great about this comp. It's not that augment reliant, and it's pretty simple. AP items on Lillia, utility on Morgana, utility on Nautilus. Next build up we have is level 8 and 9 Duelists. This is like different from the Duelist Reroll. You still could reroll. I'm not saying you can't take Volibear 3-star, Tristana 3-star, things like that. But what you're really trying to do with this comp is go level 8, play 8 Duelists with a +1 Duelist Spatula, and then run 8 Duelists. Pretty simple, right? So this image we have 6 Duelists, but if you want to get the full power out of the comp, play it with a +1 Spatula. Then you just throw in a Yasuo and call it a day. Aurelia is going to be your late game cap. She is super powerful with 8 Duelists. Put any AD items on her, put a red buff on her. Literally anything like that will do. If you have a spatula, put it on either Wukong, Diana, whoever isn't a duelist already. And then you want to do standard leveling for this type of team comp. So that means going to level 8 as safely as possible. Sometimes level 9 if you can get away with it. You know, we can't always get away with that, but when it's there, it's there. Put the items you build in the early to mid game on Tristana and Volibear, the ones in the late game on Lee Sin, and then super late game onto Aurelia to kind of really win a lot of games. Next build up we have is Ashe Warden. This is the classic 4 backline, 4 frontline build that a lot of people like. I like it a lot too. Items on Ashe has got to be the Rage Blade plus 2 items. Last Whisper going to be critical for armor penetration. And the 4 snipers, you just play all the other snipers. The only one we're missing here is Kog'Maw. That's the 5th sniper. You don't really need that. People prefer Caitlyn because you get to run Alawi. They both get Ghostly. Not the biggest synergy in the game, but it's something. So that's why people run Caitlyn over Kog'Maw. And then for the front line, Amumu, Set, Nautilus, Alawi, classic combo. Syndra's kind of like the optional one to include here if you're not level 9 yet. So if you're level 8, just play the 4 sniper, 4 warden, ditch the Syndra. So a lot of times when you're rolling down, a quick tip is not to 2-star your Syndra until you are level 9 because she's not that important. Tank items belong on the Amumu or the Nautilus, whoever you have 2 or 3-star. If you have 3-star Amumu, put them on Amumu. If you have 2-star Amumu, put them on Nautilus if Nautilus is 2-star. And then for augments, just get the sniper or warden augments or anything with attack speed because Ashe just loves attack speed. Going on into the next comp, we have Fast 9 and 5 costs. This one's going to be featuring Dragonlord, so you go 4 Dragonlord, so that's going to be Diana, Janna, Rakan, Lee Sin, and then you're just going to add in the complementary synergy legendaries such as Aurelia for Duelist, you have Azir for Invoker, Wukong for Sage, and then why not Udyr and Ornn as well. They're just very solid units. Ornn's really good in any legendary comp because he builds items, so if you have a 2-star legendary, sometimes you don't have items for them because there are only so many items you get in the game, and then Ornn just builds a custom one for that champion, which is really nice. Fast 9ing requires a lot of HP or a lot of gold, so make sure you have both of those. You could get something like Level Up to make that easier on the augments. And for items, it's pretty much anything. Just build any flex items in the early game. You're just trying to save HP. Because legendaries, they're pretty flexible on items depending on which one you hit, because you don't know what you're going to hit. So this comp is a bit tricky to play. I recommend practicing this build a little bit before you play it like as your main or whatever. But it definitely is an option when you're playing literally any other build that you see up here. And you're like, hey, maybe I could just not roll when I say to roll and just go fast 9 instead. Very viable option. Next build up we have is going to be the Ghostly Zyra. Zyra reroll is just a very popular comp right now in terms of 2-cost reroll. Shen 3, Zyra 3. Hopefully no one who's playing Senna is griefing your Shens. Most people are doing the Zyra build, and then you can pick up the other 2-cost 3-stars on the way as well, only if you have items for them, but they're not that important. As long as you have Zyra 3, Shen 3, you're going to be doing pretty well. Items for Zyra, mana regen, and then AP. Shen, I like the double stone play, but any tank items work. Other options are stuff like Redemption, Bramble Vest, Dragon Claw, things like that. Very solid 2-cost reroll build. Next one up we have is Syndra Dryad. Syndra's been getting a bit more popular. Everyone kind of lost interest in her at the start of the patch, but as it developed, a bunch of all the other 4-costs are being taken. Syndra's kind of being pretty free, and then because of that, it's a bit easier to play. The nerfs did hurt it, don't get me wrong, but it is very playable. Let's check the data on this honestly. Let's go on over to stats, champions, and then we're going to type in 4-costs over here. So average placement, Syndra's pretty high up there, like holy cow. Obviously her play rate's going to be lower than some of the tanks, going to be lower than Lillia, so that affects like the average placement, right? Like Lilia's obviously preferred over Syndra, but if you don't get Lillia, like Syndra's really not a bad option. Very solid. Next build up we have is Lillia Mythic. Mythic Lillia is pretty good, but the other Lillia build is even better. So even though Mythic got buffed, unless you're getting like 7 Mythic by having a +1 Mythic emblem, I'd go for the other Lillia build with the Morgana, but overall this is pretty solid. 5 Mythic for Invoker, but I prefer having 7 Mythic if you get something like Wandering Sentinels or something like that. Next build up we have is Midnight Siphon Yorick. You can only do this with the Midnight Siphon augment. If you saw the augments before when we were looking at them, you noticed that Midnight Siphon Plus was really good, and it still is, but regular Midnight Siphon is pretty solid as well. If you have a bunch of tank items, go for that augment. If you don't, do not go for that augment. Hopefully you have a bunch of Yoricks also, and then secondary carry, very needed because Yorick is really just a tank. So Alune in the back line, very solid for that because they're both Umbral units. Put them on the Umbral hexes so they get the nice little execute, and just throw in a bunch of behemoths because you want to get your Yorick as tanky and beefy as possible. Shen, same thing, 6 behemoth is going to be the core. Unlike Yorick, you don't need a secondary carry with Shen, but if you have the space for it, because you only have 6 units in here right now, so you could go to level 7 or level 8, throw in random stuff like Ghostly could work because Shen is really good with Ghostly because 1, he's a Ghostly unit, and 2, he's single target, so Ghostly units work really well with single target damage because you spread the debuff over really quickly. But honestly, it could just be random legendaries also. Lots of different things you could do here. Just put like a Rage Blade, at least 1 on Shen, get attack speed augments, and also get him to 3-star. Next build up we have is Umbral Alune. Pretty solid build, 4 to 6 Umbral. I like playing this with Umbral Emblem, but you don't have to do that. You could do that with just having a lot of Alunes instead. 4 Umbral is solid. I prefer 6 though, that's why I like the +1, but if you can't get that, getting like 2 Invoker is pretty nice. You still build a Spear of Shojin on Alune though, because she needs the mana regeneration, and then Sylas is a beast. Yone can still do some things, even though he's not as good as he was in the past, and then Kayn could always be that like random carry or Azir in the super late game. Mainly tank items are going to go on Sylas, but if you have too many, drop them on Ornn also. But this is going to be a 3-cost reroll build, so roll at level 7, not too much else to say there. Kog'Maw Reroll is the only 1-cost reroll that's been viable the entire set. A lot of people I've noticed have been complaining about that because it is kind of silly, right? Like, how come there's only 1-cost reroll? A lot of people only reroll. But right now, I'd really only play this if I start the game with like 5 Kog'Maws at least, or if I get too much candy. Too much candy is really, really nice. But the core of the build is just going to be 3 Mythic, 2 Behemoth, and 2 Heavenly, and 2 Snipers. So Kog'Maw, Caitlyn, Cho'Gath, Malphite, Neeko, that's going to be the core. And then later on, you could add in more Mythic, more Behemoth like you see here, or just random stuff. All you have to do is make sure you follow the 1-cost reroll pattern, which is laid out over here. Build Econ throughout stage 2, roll to 30 at level 4 at stage 3-1, and then build Econ back up at level 5, and then slow roll above 50 gold for 3-star 1-cost. Very easy comp to play. You just need the blue buff plus Nashers with the Kog'Maw to really get this comp going. Next build up we have is Duelist Reroll. This is a Duelist build that needs Volibear 3-star and Tristana 3-star. If not, it kind of sucks because you spent a lot of gold, and if you don't hit, you don't hit. You might as well go for the other Duelist version that we saw before. But both comps are solid. They both have their space in the meta. Pretty much, when you're playing Duelists, you just have to ask yourself, do I have a lot of Volibears? Do I have a lot of Tristanas? If the answer is yes, do Duelist Reroll. If the answer is no, do the level 8 or 9 Duelist build that you see up here. Very similar stuff, though. Next build up we have is going to be Trickshot Bruisers. This is going to be a Kai'Sa build. Kai'Sa kind of is a lot worse than she was before. Like, she's definitely seen better days. She's at the bottom right now, but still okay if you're able to get to the level 9. The reason why I say that is because 1, no one's going for Kai'Sa, so you hit her for free. And 2, at level 9, you could play a bunch of the legendaries. Like, if you're running Xayah 2, Udyr 2, Azir 2, you're not going to do that badly no matter how bad Kai'Sa is, just because all those units are very solid because they're very expensive. So I kind of treat this more as like a fast 9 comp. I don't do the Bruisers too much. I mainly go for the bottom version over here. This is like the more expensive version of the build with 4 Dragonlords. So if you have a bunch of AD items and you're doing the fast 9 Dragonlord build that we saw before, might be worth it to go for Kai'Sa instead of the other build. Maybe you don't hit Aurelia. It's a decent fallback plan in most cases, but standard leveling or fast 9 for this is going to be the way to go. Next build up we have is Storyweaver Bard. If you have a lot of Rage Blades, if you have perfect items, if you have Pandora's items, or if you have like a crap ton of Bards, that's the only time I would go for this. It did get slightly buffed, but I think there are better builds out there. If I have like a lot of Rage Blades, ideally I'm hoping I have like the Ethereal Blade Shen, because he uses these items much, much better. But Bard is still good, mainly because no one plays him, even as like a trait bot. Like, a lot of people in the Kai'Sa build use Bard as a trait bot before they get Xayah, but since no one plays Kai'Sa, you literally get Bard 3 for free. Also, no one plays Tahm Kench, so both these units are like super free. So if you see a lot of people doing 3-cost reroll, consider the Storyweaver Bard if you get a bunch of them, because it's overall a very solid build. Next build up we have is Shenna. I don't like this build too much because all the Zyra players are taking Shens. They literally stole him from Senna, and yeah, that's going to be the main issue with this comp, because you really need both Senna 3-star and Shen 3-star. If not, it just won't work. So make sure you scout, and when you're scouting, make sure there's 1, no one also going Shen and Senna, and 2, no one's also going Zyra, because that makes your life a ton easier. And if you do get that going, throw some AD items on Senna, really doesn't matter which ones, and then on Shen, same tank items as before, like double stone plate plus another item is my favorite. But there are a lot of different options you could do. You mainly just need 3 items on both of them. Next build up we have is Lee Sin and Kayn. Decent 4-cost comp, nothing crazy, nothing too fancy. It's just Lee Sin, Kayn, and Morgana as support. Morgana is just such a great support unit, as you've all heard me say throughout this set. But this comp has gotten a lot less popular from what I've been seeing. Mainly people go for all the other 4-cost builds, so unfortunately a lot of them use both Kayn and Lee Sin, so they might steal your units by accident. It's not because they're like hate drafting you or anything like that, but if you have a lot of melee items and need a carry, this is pretty much one of the few options you have apart from going level 9. Next build up we have is Lux Reroll, Arcanist and Porcelain. I only do this if I get a lot of emblems, so if I get an encounter that gives an emblem, if I get an augment that gives an emblem, that's the only time I would do this. If I get like +1 Arcanist or +1 Porcelain, and ideally pick another one up later, this build gets really, really, really good. 1 mana item on Lux plus 2 damage items. It's got to be Spirit Shojin because she has a pretty big mana pool. Blue buff is not really going to cut it. And then on Amumu, I like getting magic resistance shredding, but if you have a static Shiv on Lux, which is really good, you don't need the Ionic Spark, and then just throw any other tank items on Amumu. Sometimes you even get an Alawi 3-star. I itemize both Amumu and Alawi in those cases. Sometimes you get a Syndra 2 and a random blue buff, itemize Syndra 2, and then sometimes you get Lissandra really early, itemize Lissandra. You kind of flex around the 3rd or 4th unit you itemize depending on what you hit. Next build up we have is Aphelios Reroll. Shen Thresh 3, Aphelios 3 gonna be the core, and then playing like 5 or 7 Faded gonna be ideal. I really only like playing this with +1 Faded, but there are some games where you have like a ton of Aphelioses and then you're like, all right, screw it, let me just go for it without the +1 Faded. Gonna be doing okay as long as you hit. But the main power is having like 7 Faded, because it goes from like 200% bonus to 300%, which is a pretty considerable amount. I forget the exact numbers, but I think it's around there. But decent build, 3-cost reroll, 80 items and attack speed on Aphelios, tank items on Thresh. Some people even solo frontline their Thresh. If you have Gargoyle Stoneplate, lots of different creative things you could do. Next build up we have is Janna Zyra reroll. Only do this with these 2 augments, and then buy all the units you see on the screen at level 6. Level up, put in Lee Sin, put in Rakan, call it a day after that. Inkshadow Kai'Sa gonna be the next build. Only play this with +1 Inkshadow because you need to get to 7 Inkshadow. This build does not really work that well with 5. The great news is that if you do get a +1 Inkshadow early on, you could just hard force Kai'Sa and no one will contest you. And then if you manage to hit Udyr, you're going to be doing pretty well that game. Standard leveling for this one. Next build up, we have is Zoe, Soraka, Diana reroll. Same build as the Janna reroll build, except this is with Zoe as a carry. So if you have a lot of Zoes, this is one of the few builds you could do to kind of make it work. There are some Storyweaver builds that I've seen with Zoe, but this one is a little bit easier in my opinion. Next build up, we have is 4-cost Ghostly. This is like a value comp. At level 8, you pretty cheap board you're playing out here. No one's also playing Kai'Sa, and then Morgana, solid unit with Ghostly, Kayn, solid unit with Ghostly, and then all the Ghostly units are pretty cheap, and you're able to like fast 9 with this build quite easily because you could stabilize in stage 4 with this and then sell all your units later on once you get 2-star legendaries and swap your items over onto them. Decent build, just not going to be dominating any games without any crazy sort of late game. Next build up we have is Alune Invoker reroll. There's better Alune builds in Umbral, so I would kind of skip this for now. Syndra Faded, better Syndra build, so I would also kind of skip this for now. After that we have his Arcanist Warden. Again, better builds, but you could use all these comps that we just skipped over as like temporary builds to either go into their better versions or to fast 9. For example, with Arcanist Warden, it's a great way to get into a lot of fast 9ing, especially with Hui as a carry because you have a bunch of AP items. Azir could also use some of the items that they use, and you could even use different 4 costs as you transition. Next one up we have is the B tier, Yone, Dryad, Storyweaver, Mythic Bard. Again, better builds exist. I wouldn't really play these. Built different in the C tier, Kha'Zix reroll. Like, yeah, don't really pay too much attention to those. What you should be paying attention to the most is going to be the S tier. Obviously, the first 2, you need the augment for it. A little unlucky, but whoever gets it just gets a free game, essentially. The default is going to be Sage Lillia for sure. Duelist gonna be solid option if you have a bunch of AD items. Ashe Warden also solid too, but like again, my default gotta be Sage Lillia. I love slamming Morgana items early because so many different comps can use Morgana items. It's really just like a anti-heal plus a mana item, but this has got to be my comp of the week. From lower rated players, I've been told that they really like Ashe Warden. For example, a couple of my friends who are playing TFT, they pretty much only go for this comp, so if you are looking for a beginner friendly comp, I do recommend Ashe Warden. And then if you're looking for something a little more advanced, do some fast 9ing with the Dragonlords over here. Ghostly Zyra if you're a reroll person, and then Duelist if you're like, I'm not sure what I want to do. Do I want to reroll? Do I want to play fast 8? Like, do I have the +1 Duelist augment? That's going to be how you kind of decide to play that. If you can't get any of these comps, choose one of the A tier comps. There's got to be one direction you're leaning in that allows you to kind of go for these. So pick and choose that one as you see fit. It's going to depend on your game. But that's going to round out the meta snapshot for this week. If you want more information, head on over to bunnymuffins.lol/meta, where you could get all the different item recommendations, all the augment recommendations, and like a little write-up on each and every comp. So definitely check that out. But that's going to be it from me today. Hope to see you all next time.